welcome everyone. And it's just a pleasure to have you for the launch of Bev's Open House. And it is absolutely my pleasure to have our guest today is Mary Skelton Roberts. And she is, I had the pleasure of first meeting Mary when I was the CEO, general manager at MBTA in Boston. And I was like, I found someone. I felt like a kindred spirit because I found someone who quite candidly, very deeply in the environmental community. So Mary is the co-climate director at the Barr Foundation in Boston. And I mean, she's just done so many things, regionally known, nationally known. She's done international work. And so Mary, for all of I couldn't have thought of anybody better than you to really ask to kick us off. And really give us a little bit more about yourself. What kind of got you into all of this? Why do you stay in it? Because I tell you, you're like an ever-ready battery. I mean, you're always okay. You know what I'm saying? So just talk a little bit in the work that you do and why it's important, and take us on in.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Well, I have to start by saying that the love fest is mutual. I remember when I met you over the lunch, I said, this is going to be such a great and lasting relationship. Talk about an icon in the field. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm thrilled that I get to launch your inaugural web seminar, Bev's Open House. I think this is such a great way and such a great platform to recognize women and women of color that are doing some incredible work around transportation and land use. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Mary. I born and raised in Boston, but am the daughter of immigrants. So I want to start my story there. My parents came from Cuba. They had very little resources. And so I grew up in Boston at a time when this city wasn't as welcoming for people of color, didn't have a way of engaging and embracing immigrants, and also didn't really feel like home for people that grew up in the Caribbean. When my parents came here, they knew a few things. They knew, number one, that they were never going back to Cuba. They knew, number two, that they had 3 daughters that they needed to figure out how to raise and how to make sure that they were able to benefit from the American dream. And number 3, they knew the pathway to getting us to be successful, productive, meaningful contributors to society was really around education. And so in many ways, I stand here today because I'm the living manifestation of my parents and every immigrant and every American's, their dream for the future, their dream for the children. I got into the work around climate and transportation and all of its intersectionality because I grew up in a city where, even though we weren't high income, I would even argue by today's standards we were poor, we didn't know it. And the reason we didn't know it is because we were part of a community. We were part of a community of working class people. Some of them had been long established residents. Some of them were new immigrants like my parents. But this was a community where we cared about each other, we supported each other, and there was a lot of sort of love and connection. And it was a community that was very, very multicultural. So I grew up not knowing that the rest of the world didn't look like that, or the rest of the country or Massachusetts even didn't look like that. I also, though, grew up having access to so much of what this city had to offer. My father learned how to drive, soon after he got here, but my mother didn't drive for maybe decades after she got to Boston. And so public transportation became our access to the world. And so I grew up with a system of transportation that got me wherever I needed to go through the city. So when I think about the work I do now around climate and transportation, it's so core to me, and it's how I was able to really expand my horizons. When I went to high school taking public transportation. I got on the train. When I went to college, I went to school. When I came back for graduate school, I take the Red Line. So I have a deep not just appreciation, but an understanding that no matter what your income is, no matter where you come from, if you're able to think about public transportation as a gateway to opportunity, as a gateway to recreation, as a way to sort of connect people to everything their cities and their states and commonwealths have to offer, then what we've done is we've created a system that really works for all. So when I talk about the work, I don't always tell that story, but when I talk about the work, I'm focused so deeply on climate change, but I so understand that transportation can get us those climate goals. If we have more people biking, walking, taking public transit, it's good for the environment. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a long way to say. So there's so much of this like is literally in my DNA.
You know, Mary, when you're talking, I'm closing my eyes. I'm saying to myself, you're saying my story. Okay. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I used 3 buses and a rapid transit to wind up going back and forth to school. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I didn't even learn how to drive until I was a fully married woman. I didn't have to. Mary, tell me, let me ask you this one. And because you know it at such a deep level, okay? This everything we're going through now. Now I don't know what words to call it, unprecedented, draconian. I want you to kind of take the Mary crystal ball out, if you will, okay, and talk a little bit about. We know all the not just transportation. Everybody is devastating, okay, ravaged, okay, but there are also some learnings, I think.
Dr. Scott, that is a fabulous question. There's so much right now that has been disrupted. COVID has changed everything that we thought was true. The racial protest and the racial unrest is creating a moment of reckoning that's asking us, what is the society we want to build? And if you put COVID and the racial unrest together, what we actually have is an opportunity to reimagine what our future could look like, and a future that's more just, more equitable, and that we have more winners than losers, right? Right now, there's such an inequitable distribution of everything: health, resources, access to opportunity. So when I think about the work that we're doing in climate and in transportation, I see transportation as so fundamentally important to reinventing this future. And in order for us to do that, what we're going to have to think about is, how do we literally do a couple of things really good. Number one is, how do we ensure that as we are building, right, whether it's new transit systems, whether it's our energy sector, whether it's some of our infrastructure, how are we scaling down so that what we actually are building are the kinds of transportation systems, energy systems that are locally based, right? So we're looking at distributive energy, so that if you have a huge climate catastrophe, one system goes down, we have resiliency built in, right? In the transportation system, it's around rethinking transportation so that you're not spending billions to build these big infrastructure projects, when we know that where people are moving to and where they're going to live in the future is starting to change dramatically. So I'm talking about a level of flexibility that enables us to build things that meet our current needs, but also are flexible for the future.
So Mary, I guess I'm hearing you say, you know, that the flexibility and all that, but that you really need to use this time, this moment, okay, to really do, I say, you know, that real strategic thinking of focusing on where is it that we really want to wind up? What is the future that we really want to have? What are the outcomes that we really want to have? And instead of, yes, we all know that we're ravaged and we know that we have to get there, but let's make sure that where we're going is not just some, oh, we got to get back to the status quo. And so when you think about that, I mean, what are some of the, you know, like what would be some of the kind of pillars that you can almost like readily see that, yeah, in order to be able to really make the changes we need to do this?
Dr. Scott, I think that at the federal level, one of the problems is that we fund by programs or projects or agencies, and we don't fund by the outcomes we want, and we don't fund place. So if we were putting an investment in certain cities, suburbs, opportunities, you would ask yourself, what is it that you want that community to be able to achieve or to do, right? And so then you're not funding a water project. You're funding, a community building project that includes water elements, transportation,
Yes.
in public health, right? And then you're able to allocate resources and build on economies of scale. But right now what happens is you're funding a public works project here, you're funding a transportation project here, you're funding an energy project here, and they're not coordinated, or are they not speaking to each other, right?
Absolutely.
The other thing I really think we need to be looking at, and I mean, I got this from you because you say it all the time, is you talk about we have $2 trillion in procurement, right?
Ooh.
We have a jobs problem here now. COVID we've lost millions of dollars in jobs in the economy. The best way to get people working is through infrastructure, having them build, having them recreate, right? And so can we use this procurement process to get people more jobs, to get dollars to build out a new reimagined, a 21st century transportation, water, electric system, energy system? How do we use procurement to do that more effectively?
It is starting exactly where you said. What are the outcomes that we are trying to drive from a national perspective?
Dr. Scott, I love this conversation, because when you go to other countries in Europe, right? They have outcomes, some of them are public outcomes written into the procurement process. And it not only gets you, so then they're able to create jobs, they're able to do a bunch of things, and they're able to keep costs down because they see procurement, right? They understand the procurement function, and they don't let it become abused. We have not done enough in this country to really both understand procurement and say, is it functioning? Is it operating the way we expect it and demand of it? Those are public dollars. We don't even look at procurement.
That's it. And we don't. And there's such an opportunity there. I said, now, not that we don't need more dollars. I said, but if we would use the dollars that we have, and there's nothing wrong with using the dollars that we have to intentionally, with no apologies, drive good jobs, business development opportunities, growth opportunities. There's nothing wrong. Dirty graft and corruption does not come along with that. Okay. And so, and to take it from being, I'm getting emotional, passionate.
Wait, but I'm going to stop you, because I want to put a pin in something you said, because we talk a lot. And you one day told me that the transportation system is changing so rapidly. So much of it is becoming automated. A lot of it is sort of computerized these days. So much of it requires engineering and all kinds. Tell me how many jobs are in the transportation, in the transport field, and what the opportunities are there. So notice I'm interviewing you now, Dr.
Mary, I would tell you whatever slice, and I tell people, which transport am I talking about now? The one with water, aviation, maritime, all of that. I would tell you, we've got well over a half million jobs. Okay, and I'm saying that well over. Okay, and I'm saying and I'm just saying on the public transport side of the house. Okay, so when you're talking about, I mean, there are every one of these big sectors. Literally, we drive overall about 14% of the overall economy is driven by what's coming out of these infrastructure sectors.
Those numbers are unbelievable.
And then let me tell you this, and if you look at manufacturing, okay, just manufacturing itself, one of the reasons we decry the fact that we've lost the middle class. Well, one of the reasons we lost the middle class was that there was a point is that we don't make things anymore. In fact, we actually we couldn't even make masks.
One of the things that will happen, or I am optimistic that's going to happen, is what we saw during the COVID when we quarantined most of the country, is that we had this shutdown, right? Of manufacturing. There was nothing coming in from overseas, and we saw a weakness in our supply chain. I am optimistic that part of what we should be doing as we think about reimagining is bringing more of the manufacturing back to the United States.
Absolutely.
Right? It's another way of creating some of the trades. It's a way of creating more jobs across the income. And they don't require some of these advanced degrees. To your point, not everybody needs to go out and get an engineering degree. Some people make a lot of money doing trade.
Absolutely.
And so let's elevate that. And we have an opportunity to do that right now.
I'm with you, Mary. I think there is no, there is nothing, quote, good about COVID at all. Okay, not that part. However, the opportunity that it really gives us, I think the imperative, it's not even an opportunity, okay? The imperative that it's a wake-up call. Mary, talk some about a lot of your work in Boston, around Boston 2030, and how do you do this? The real inroads that you all made in terms of civic engagement. I mean, it was at a whole different, it was off the chain. It was on a whole different level than I've ever seen anybody wind up doing it. Okay, and I'm saying, which is part of this. You just can't pontificate about these things. This community building, you gotta, if you talk a little bit about how you did this, how you did it.
It's one of the things I'm most proud of, having been at the Bar Foundation. So several years ago, what we recognized was that if you are going to do really good transportation work, you need, to your point, Dr. Scott, you need a vision, and then you need a plan for implementation. And because we have such good relationships with the people at the Boston Transportation Department and with the city government, we went to them and said, can we help you really put together a long-range transportation plan for the city, one that accomplishes climate goals, equity goals, and access goals. And the city said to us, we'd love your help, but we're not quite, tell us what you have in mind. And so I have a background in consensus building and community problem solving. And I wanted to do something big. And I called a colleague named Caesar McDowell, who used to be at the Interaction Institute for Social Change. He's now at MIT. And I said, Caesar, can we work with you to really think about doing two good things well? One is to change the way transportation planners do their plans, which is usually they have a meeting, they have a plan, it's already baked, and they give it to the community in a room, and then they expect to get meaningful feedback. I said, we all know that doesn't work. So can we do something different about that? And the other thing I wanted a plan that was driven by the lived experience and the needs of the Boston community. And so those two goals served as the foundation for the work that we did. And what BAR did is we funded the entire community engagement process. And through our funding, it gave us such an opportunity to do something that, honestly, I'm not sure the city could have done. And if they had done it, they might have been viewed as being or using city resources in the wrong way. This is why philanthropy matters, because we were able to direct our dollars to give the city a plan that was rich and robust without the city putting themselves at risk that they were utilizing public dollars maybe in a way that might not be appropriate for cities. So what we did was we funded the most extensive community engagement process the city of Boston had ever done to date. Mm-hmm. And it had multiple layers. There was an online component where where the question that the city asked, what is your vision for transportation? So started really big and started bold. And that question was asked online, and then it was asked in every community. There are 16 neighborhoods, because Boston is super parochial. Everybody has a neighborhood in Boston, so 16 neighborhoods. And there were fairs, there were existing community events that got plugged into. And we asked everyone from 95-year-olds to 5-year-olds. And people said, flying helicopters, dinosaurs. We got these fabulous ideas, but it just gave people an opportunity to think in a way that was unrestricted. We then, and if this was done in the middle of February, if we had to do it all over again, maybe we would have planned the timing a little bit differently, but it was done in the middle of February, and we had question trucks, these trucks, again, serving hot chocolate, through every neighborhood, asking people to do vision boards on this truck. It was an amazing opportunity because, again, I think there were 1,500 suggestions that came from that. There were community forums. And in the end, the city of Boston got more than, I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 recommendations for the priorities for transportation. They then had these working groups, again, made up of community-based organizations and residents and experts, sitting together, culling these ideas and putting them into categories. What the city now has, its plan is called Go Boston 2030.
Yeah.
It is the most extensive and engaging public outreach plan that's ever been done. And more importantly, the city has a mandate from the community that says these are things that matter for transportation. 2 years ago, the Department of Transportation was actually able to do two amazing things. They were able to get capital budget dollars to implement the plan. Okay. So I love that, because that's how you see how planning results in real outcomes. So that was one of the things they were able to accomplish. And the second thing is that they're able to go back to residents and say, here's what you said you needed, and here's how we are meeting those objectives. So I love that work. I love when you're saying we have big challenges. How do you engage residents in creating a vision? And then how does systems change happen? And Go Boston 2030 set the stage for other planning processes that came soon after that.
When you actually engage and I mean seriously engage the community, they're with you. They're with you. The things that the lessons learned, you'll be learning them together. There's a sense of the whole transparency and accountability and all of that. Mary, the work, I mean, honestly, the flowers, if you will, the roses that have come as a function of that work, I've just been absolutely unbelievable. Mary, let me ask you this. Now, you know me with the youngsters, the youngins, okay? Mary, for young women, and young women of color, okay, what would you say to them? Because I still, I do a lot of work with youth, and the numbers of young women and young women of color are nowhere near what they need to be in terms of these careers, whether it's transportation or the water sector or the energy sector or advanced manufacturing. Certainly, overall, women underrepresented, okay, but but my point is that yes, I'm a woman, but I'm a woman of color, and that is a different experience in many respects. What would you say to them, to young folks, about why you're in it, why you stayed in it, and what advice could you give them?
That's a wonderful question. So the first thing I want to say is that more women of color are not in this field, because the way the field is described, sometimes it seems too narrow. But if you look at transportation, there are many places that we can and should be working, and we have to both expand how we think about the work. And then if you're the person looking for work, don't be so quick to say, oh, I don't do transportation, or I don't want a job doing this, because there's so much opportunity and you have to be flexible. So that's one. I think the other thing is that we need three things in order to get more young people to be in this field. I think we need exposure. By that I say, when I started this work, I did not consider myself an environmentalist, let alone a climate person. And yet I realized the work I have been doing around, environmental issues, around sustainability, around my community. You hear me talking about access and transportation. All of that is climate. Like when you look behind the curtain, that is climate. That is transportation. So expanding the definition of the work you think you are doing, I think, is really important. I also think it's getting to know people in those spaces that even if you have a slight interest. Like I got into this work because I had a lot of mentors, and more importantly, people that were doing things that I really didn't understand. The other thing I think is really important is access. If we are in these fields now, we have a responsibility. And I know, Dr. Bev, you do this all the time, right? You are trying to create access for young people. I do this also in my field. So what responsibility did those that are in those roles have to create access, so that you're doing internships, or you're doing training programs, or you're just taking people on site visits so they can see that there are all these careers in this space. And then the other thing I think that's needed is, I think we need real dedicated commitment to having enough people of color in this field. They have lived experience. Yeah. Many of them have the educational experience. And we all know, if we're being really honest, most jobs, you're trained when you get there, right? So all the barriers that people think exist or that we create or are created for our people, you have to be kind of tough and not buy into those, because we know that there are people that get jobs all the time and they are trained and well supported and engaged. So I think we have to apply those same standards.
Yeah.
And honestly, what I'm seeing is that the more of us are on those selection committees, the more of us that are pushing for more diversity, the
Right.
numbers begin to creep up. You start seeing more representation. And if you are a young person and you care about the environment or you care about climate, start calling yourself a climate expert. Start calling yourself, use your lived experience and step into that place, because I think you'd be surprised how much people will embrace you.
Are there any other things that you would like? You are just I just can't tell you, your wealth of inspiration. Just keep on being who you are. I mean, the person who helps to kind of pull it all together. You don't think little. Okay. I mean, what I really no, you don't think little. Okay. It's like, say, well, we can do this. Okay. And I mean, and you do, it's beyond an engine that could. And I'm just honored to call you a colleague as well as a friend. So any things you want to leave with us, Mary, before I let you go your way. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I think I want to come back to this moment because there's been so much disruption, so much suffering, so much pain.
Yeah.
And I also think of these other moments in time where we've transformed society, right? After the First and Second World Wars, the Depression, the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
This feels very similar. It's so disruptive that we have an opportunity, to my point again, to recreate what we want America to be. And to your point, Dr. Scott, to live up to its promise, right, of providing opportunity for more people. And I think we can do this if we really do, like, we lean into this moment. And when I think about why it matters to do it now, is that, like I said, everyone's paying attention.
Yeah.
We're defining the problems in the same way.
Yeah.
We have a demographic shift where there's more young people. It's the most, to your point, the most multicultural society that America has ever had. It's the youngest population that this country has ever had. They already know climate is real, right? And so how do we do this work so that your grandchild's child can come back and say, thank you, Granny, thank you, Mary, thank you all for not giving up. And I know, like, we hit these moments where we have so much despair. I want to hit this moment where we're saying, this is work that should be done. It's good work, and we have resilience, but more importantly, the patience to see it through.
Yeah.
And so if I want to, my only parting words is, we are getting there, and don't give up, and let's keep it moving.
That's right. This is one of those, I agree with you. It's one of those punch through moments, and we just got to punch through. Okay. So Mary, thank you so much. Absolutely. All the very, very best to you and your family. And I look forward to continuing to work with you on this journey, and we're going to get it accelerated. Okay.
Love this. That is a deal. It is such a pleasure. I'm always delighted to be in your company, and I know we will talk soon. So have a good afternoon.
And mi casa, su casa. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.